Another way, if you want more equality concerning life extension, you really have to be in favor of it and to invest in scientific ways, because otherwise this inequality will happen anyway, but you will have some treatment in Asia or in other countries for rich people, and you will not have this for the poor people. So one of the paradoxes is people saying, oh, it's not good to have life extension because it will be only for rich people. They are the people making it possible to have this inequality. And one last thing is, at the moment, contrary to what many people think, the inequalities concerning life extensions, concerning the life expectancy in the south and in the north are narrowing. So the life expectancy is rising faster in the southern countries than in the northern countries. Like, for example, Bangladesh, it raises 12 years the last 25 years. That's because of there are less children dying and so on, but it's important to know that there are no more differences now than 20 years ago, but less differences.
When I asked the question about who would take the pill, it was phrased as if it would give you an extra 100 years. I know this is probably highly unlikely, but let's just, to confuse matters, let's assume that the technology is such, like you're going to get filled with nanobots or something. They're what's going to fix things, but Aubrey hasn't invented how to take them out. So once they're in, they have to stay in. So let's now assume that that pill isn't going to give you an extra 100 years. It has to give you, say, 1,000 years is how likely it's likely to last. Would you still take the pill then? Guaranteed
I need to know one thing when it comes to that, because I think the question is incomplete. Yeah, well, I think the question is incomplete as it's being asked.
Okay.
But I think there are logistical elements that are important. First of all, what would you do with the problem of overpopulation? At a given point, people will need to stop to be born. I mean, the mountains and so on, so this would be a problem.
Yeah.
And the second question would be, and you already mentioned it before, we'd have more time to get hit by trucks, which is true. We'd have more time to have accidents, to lose limbs, to lose important parts of our body. And as far as I understand, the techniques that you're working on do not necessarily address this.
Oh yeah, they're easy, that's trivial.
So how would we do this?
Well, I mean, I'm not saying it's trivial, but it's a lot easier than most of the things about aging. Aging is really, really hard to fix. That's why I work with it, right? No, growing a new limb is relatively straightforward. And certainly giving you a prosthetic one is very straightforward.
And that was still over half the room, I think, that sort of tentatively put up their hands, barring the fact that
Well, we don't know. Maybe all of them will bring their hands up to ask questions about your question.
Okay, yes. That makes you, yeah,
well, we haven't done the population thing. I mean, everyone's going to have that on their mind. So why don't we do it?
Okay.
All right? All right. Give you ask about population, right? So, people tend not to be very good at intuition about the mathematics here. And so I'm going to be a bit mathematical for a few minutes. I'm going to start with some very obvious things that a remarkable number of people overlook. First one is, even if we completely eliminated all death, whether it was from aging or from being hit by trucks or anything, people will still only get older at 1 year per year. So we're not going to have any 1,000-year-old people for at least another 900 years, whatever happens. That's easy to miss, but it's very, very important to take into account, because a hell of a lot happens in 900 years. In particular, other technology happens. Now, the big reason why that's important is because other technology is an enormous determinant of the carrying capacity of the planet. If we think about why it's a bad thing that we've got 7 billion people on the planet now, ultimately it comes down to carbon footprint and such like. It comes down to things which are amenable, in principle, to amelioration by technology, by the invention of nuclear fusion or better renewable energy or whatever. We could very easily end up in as little as 50 or 100 years in a situation in which we could have 100 billion people on the planet with less environmental impact than we see today. Now that's something that we must not discount, because if we do discount it, then what we are doing is we're saying, we know better, we know that such and such a technology is not going to happen, therefore we know that there's going to be such and such a problem, in this case overpopulation, therefore let's not go there, let's not invent these technologies. And then 50 years from now, our kids are going to be out there having solved these problems that we thought couldn't be solved, and they haven't got the technologies to let them not get sick when they get old that they could have had if we'd taken the trouble to develop them, and they're not going to be very happy with us. I do not want to be in that position of having to explain myself in my will or whatever,
or to your great-great-great-grandchildren.
to people for whom I have failed to develop the technology to keep them from getting Alzheimer's disease because I thought they didn't have the smarts to stop the population from getting unmanageable. Of course, the same also applies not just to technology, but also to social choices, to fertility rates and to age at which women have their kids on average. The fertility rate in every single society that's ever reached a certain level of emancipation and education and prosperity of women has always plummeted. I think Israel can just about be considered to be an exception, but pretty much, but absolutely everywhere else. We're seeing today in the most populous countries in the world, in China, in India, in Brazil, they've got literally half the fertility rate, the average number of kids per woman, that they had 20 years ago. It's ridiculous how rapidly these things happen. And as time goes on, more and more countries are undergoing this transition. This is why the United Nations currently predicts that global population will start to fall around 2050. Now, of course, if we were to eliminate all death, or even the 2/3 of all deaths that are caused by aging, then that would be delayed. But it still means that it's not a problem that's just going to be unmanageable. We also need to take into account the average age at which women have children, which is something that always goes up at the same time that the average number of children goes down. One thing we're going to be fixing when we fix aging is menopause. Now you may think to yourself, oh dear, that's terrible, that's going to exacerbate the overpopulation problem because women will carry on having children for more and more time. But what you need to think about is why women are choosing to have their children later as they become more prosperous and have more choices in life. Of course, different women have different reasons, but the overall outcome seems to be that women are delaying until they can't delay anymore because it's then or never, because of menopause. So after menopause is eliminated because women have new ovaries or whatever and they can carry on having kids perfectly safely however long they live, then you can imagine that your average woman is going to choose, not every woman of course, but we're talking about populations here, so the average is what matters, is going to choose to delay their first kid by another decade and another decade. And that, of course, if you think about the mathematics, that has an enormous impact on the trajectory of global population. So the population question is certainly not one that we ought to ignore, but it is a question that's very easy to overstate.